Hello and welcome to the February 2023 Longevity Review, presented to you by the Canadian Longevity Association, a federally incorporated nonprofit whose mission is to help accelerate the introduction of effective longevity treatments and to ensure their free availability to all Canadians under the healthcare system. My name is Chris Linnell, and I am the founder and president of the association. In this month's review, we will take a look at some safety data for senolytics, a new molecule against presbyopia, the effect of calorific restriction on epigenetic age, how oral hygiene and the best time of day to exercise can lower mortality, and curcumin for men with lower urinary tract symptoms, plus a few other bits and bobs from the supplemental section. But first, a brief plug and some news from the CLA. So we are a volunteer-run organization and are just starting out, so we could certainly use your help regardless of your skill set or time availability. If you'd like to help us achieve our mission, then please get in touch either via our website, Twitter, Facebook group, or indeed via the YouTube channel you're watching now. All of those links can be found below the video. There's also a registration form for volunteers, which you can find there. Now, the big news for us in the past month is that we have finally flipped over our sort of bespoke friend-programmed website to a WordPress managed account, which I'll just show you here. Is basically the same, doesn't look any really different from our previous website. However, the big change, once it actually loads, I don't translate that. The big change is that, we're seeing the French already. The big change is that we have gone bilingual. So most of the website can be switched between the French, as it looks is here, and the English. So obviously a little bit more welcoming for our Quebecois friends. And yes, the fact that we've now switched over to a WordPress managed account basically means that we can now really start expanding the website. And this is one of the areas where more volunteers are very much welcomed because, yes, we need help with expanding it more quickly. And finally, before we move on to the review, just wanted to send a congratulations to our friends down at the Alliance for Longevity Initiatives in the States, who a few weeks ago launched their Longevity Science Caucus, which is basically a bipartisan grouping consisting of both Democrats and Republicans who are going to basically push the longevity agenda forward and hopefully increase funding for longevity down in the States. But this is a great sign of progress and certainly something that we would like to achieve here in Canada as well. And in fact, Dylan Livingston, the president, has already offered their help in assisting us achieve that aim. Okay, plug over. Now let's start taking a look at this month's newsletter, starting with the roundup. And the first study we are going to take a look at is simply a safety study for senolytics. And then just a little background on senolytics. So senolytics are drugs which remove senescent cells. And senescent cells, sometimes referred to as zombie cells, are cells which accumulate in our body as we get older, and they are cells which have become dysfunctional. They should have been sort of removed by the body, but for whatever reason, they linger about, secreting all sorts of inflammatory signals and basically causing us problems as we age. Now, in animal models, removing senescent cells with senolytics alleviates some of those aging symptoms and generally improves the health of animals and marginally also improves their lifespan. Now, a few initial pilot studies have taken of senolytics in humans have taken place already. A couple small results have been out, but that was a few years ago, and lots of studies are currently underway and hopefully will be producing some results this year. However, the study we're going to briefly take a look at now was a follow-up study to the very first one, which was published in 2019, looking at idiopathic pulmonary fibrosis. And in that small unblinded study, it seemed to show some improvement, or indication that there was some improvement in the recipients. Now, this second study, also a tiny study, only 12 people, 6 on the drugs, 6 control, was basically just to look at the safety of this combination, or the combination of senolytics. Were actually the first senolytics to be sort of found, and they are dasatinib, a cancer drug, and quercetin, which is a supplement, a substance which is found in the peel of apples and in red onions, and can be bought as a supplement. And it was this combination of these two drugs was sort of the first senolytic to be discovered back in 2015 or thereabouts. Anyway, in this small trial, again, only 6 people in each arm, and it was over 3 weeks, where every week on 3 consecutive days, the people taking the drugs either received 100 milligrams of dasatinib or 1,250 milligrams of quercetin per day over 3 consecutive days during 1 week, over the course of 3 weeks. So this is a tiny study, so way too small to look for any indication of effectiveness. Statistically, it's just too tiny. However, it was important to find out if there are any major adverse events. And although there were more adverse events in the treatment arm, so 65 versus 22, they were all overall non-serious. And taking a look at, here we go. Taking a look at the detail of the results. I won't go into the details too deeply, don't worry. The important thing here is, so we have non-serious adverse events, serious adverse events, and fatal, which would be very much serious adverse events. Dasatinib and quercetin, so D and Q as it's otherwise known as, the placebo. And although, yes, there were more non-serious ones in the treatment arm than in the placebo arm, the important thing was that there were no serious adverse events, or especially fatal adverse events, in both arms. But obviously for our concern, it's all about what's happening in the treatment arm. And in terms of actual, what were the otherwise adverse events found in the treatment arm, they were fairly minor. I think the worst were that there was some sleep disturbances and anxiety were disproportionately represented in the D and Q arm. But again, this was just a small safety study. It was mainly designed to inform future trials, future larger trials, which are now underway. So hopefully we will soon get some efficacy data from then. But again, we've been sort of waiting for a couple of years for after those initial results came out, like 2019. We've been sort of waiting, or maybe 2020. We've been waiting a couple of years for more senolytic results. So that's why it has been, I put this at the front of the queue in terms of the roundup, and fingers crossed we will see a lot more results. Certainly there are a number of trials were either meant to have completed in the second half of last year, or will be completing this year. Of course, then it takes a while to analyze results, write the results up, and get them published. But again, fingers crossed, we will see some more senolytic results later this year. Now, the next study, not in humans. In fact, it's an in vitro study, so sort of only in sort of test tubes. But it caught my eye, in the pun fully intended there, because scientists might have found a molecule which could help with presbyopia. So presbyopia is basically nearsightedness. So when you need reading glasses to read, and I'm at the age, I just turned 47 a couple days ago, where it is beginning to happen to me. I don't have a problem reading, but when I bring the page closer to me, around here, it has started in me. So I'm very, very keen for any eye drops or any drugs that might preserve my sight going forward, not needing glasses. So I wore glasses when I was younger, but then got laser eye surgery. But anyway, in this study, scientists have found a molecule called Agrelite 2, which could promote, which in this study at least promotes the solubility of lenses and reduces their stiffness. So in this study, lenses from mice and humans were taken and sort of basically bathed in, I mean, they tested numerous molecules, and this one was the best one, and they sort of bathed the lenses in this in a solution of this molecule. I think for humans it was, they were incubated for 72 hours. Well, only 24 hours for the mice lens, and it showed significant decreases in stiffness with simultaneous increases in soluble proteins in human lenses. Which is a good thing. And as it says here, these results suggest that Agrelite 2 increases protein solubility and decreases lens stiffness through acetylation and disulfide reduction. And Agrelite 2 might be useful in treating presbyopia in humans. Now, I'm not going to go through and take a look at all the graphs and stuff here, and charts and things, but generally speaking, it sort of seemed, looking at the bars or whatever, that Agrelite 2 compared to control and compared to the second best substance tested seemed to produce better results. But early time, again, these were lenses in a test tube. So the next stage is to move to sort of animal models, which the authors are supposedly looking at. But again, something to look out for and keep an eye on. And in my case, cross those fingers that the science moves fairly quickly. Moving on from a future science to a future solution to a solution that is available now, though perhaps not the easiest one to accomplish, and that is calorie restriction, which is the oldest means of increasing lifespan. So it basically, which was sort of discovered back in the 1930s in rats. But calorie restriction, calorific restriction, basically involves cutting the amount of calories you consume every day by 25–30% thereabouts, and while at the same time maintaining your nutrition. So sort of, in a sense, cutting out the excess calories that don't achieve anything, so to speak. And at least in rodent models, the scientists have found that the greater the reduction in calories, the greater the increase in lifespan. And obviously, this is quite difficult to achieve in humans, even though there are various people trying it out for themselves. There have, however, been a few studies in this. The biggest of which was called Calorie 2, and it involved some 200 people or so, 222 people, where they tried to reduce their calories by 25%, and they were followed for 2 years. And what scientists actually found out was that it was quite difficult to reduce calories by 25%, and most people did not achieve that. In fact, I'm not sure if any person was able to actually reduce their calories by 25% over the whole 2-year period. Anyway, previous studies or previous papers have shown that, at least in the short term, over that 2-year period, various metrics of health improved, I believe, in terms like inflammation and vascular health, and various sort of biomarkers got better. But of course, an actual lifespan study in humans would take decades and is basically not feasible. So scientists have been looking at ways to short circuit that lengthy trial design of a lifespan study. And one way that they might have found to shorten it is by using epigenetic clocks. So epigenetic clocks look at markers on our genomes, which basically change during the course of aging in a somewhat predictable manner. I won't go to the details here, but by looking at various sites on the genome and how these markers change, various clocks have been developed to sort of be able to predict roughly what someone's age is just based on a DNA sample, but also to see whether or not somebody is aging faster or more slowly, depending on, I guess, the average for that particular age, and whether or not people have more or less of those changes in their epigenetic markings. So in this study, they went back and they looked at the data from this Calorie2 study, and they tried 3 different epigenetic clocks on this data. And what they found out is that for 2 of the clocks, the PhenoAge and the Grim age clock, basically didn't sort of change their epigenetic age, at least according to those 2 metrics. However, the Dunedin-Pace DNAM algorithm there did show a slowing down of age. Now, one difference between the first 2 clocks and this last one is that the first 2 clocks are meant to just pick up a single point in time, whereas the Dunedin pace aging was sort of a clock developed by following a cohort of people over a period of time. Actually, it's an ongoing study going over lasting over 30 years now. Anyway, 40 years, in fact. Taking a look at the data here, you can see 3 charts. The first one is the PhenoAge clock. Second one is the Grim age clock. And the third one is this Dunedin pace aging clock. And in all 3 graphs, the blue line is the treatment arm, and the red line is the control arm from the calorific restriction study. And you can see here for both PhenoAge and for Grim age, there was no real difference. In fact, for both of them, it seemed the Grim age and PhenoAge maybe got slightly worse after 2 years. So this is 24 months, 2 years. The Dunedin pace age did show a statistical difference between the people on calorie restriction and those who were not. And that wasn't a huge one. It only resulted in a 2 to 3% change in the pace of aging. However, the authors conclude that that would be a mortality reduction of 10 to 15%. And what also they discovered, that there was a greater effect in those people who managed to reduce their calories by more than 10%. They sort of had a 10% cutoff. And yes, those people who, this is mentioned here, but yes, those people, somewhere in the paper mentions it, those people who managed to reduce their calories by more than 10% showed a more beneficial outcome. Now, of course, calorie restriction is easier said and done, as witnessed by all the failed attempts at dieting, and how diets are new diets are keep on being developed and people don't seem to be able to stick to them. So it does require perhaps too great amount of willpower for most people. But if you can accomplish it, then yes, even like a reduction as little as 10%, then again, this study seems to indicate or adds additional evidence to previous studies that calorie restriction does have a benefit. Now, moving on from a difficult to achieve mortality reduction to something much simpler, and I think one within each of ours reach, is a study looking at how oral hygiene practices influence mortality. And this study, how many people? Yeah, 354 people took part, so a sort of a larger study, and they were followed over 18 years. And sort of the groupings were people who basically didn't or had poor oral hygiene, which meant that they didn't regularly brush their teeth or floss. Then people with better oral hygiene, where they at least brush their teeth every day. And finally, people with much better oral hygiene, where they also added flossing to the equation. And finally, also people who used mouthwash as well. And what they found, let's take a look at this graph to show it. I'll get down there. Yes, here you can see this graph. So there was a quite considerable difference when adding brushing and flossing to your oral hygiene regime. So this is over 18 years, and there's a number of people alive after 18 years. And you can see, I mean, the bottom here is 80%. So most people, I don't know, maybe even the worst case, 85% were still alive after 18 years. But the red line at the bottom are those people with poor oral hygiene. So they didn't brush or floss their teeth. Those who only brushed showed a better mortality rate or better survival curve. However, even better than that, those who added flossing to their oral hygiene regime showed a quite considerable improvement in their mortality rate, especially cardiovascular. Sorry, I should say this is all about cardiovascular mortality rate. So they had an improvement of around 51% over those people with poor oral hygiene. One thing that wasn't shown by any graph, however, they wrote up about it, was the fact that those people who also, in addition, also added mouthwash. There didn't seem to be any statistical difference or no additional added benefit. So, but again, this is really showing the stark difference here, how flossing can really make a difference. If you don't floss, get flossing, basically, is the take home message. And again, why does this affect cardiovascular disease? Well, researchers have been finding out that some of the bad oral bacteria has been sort of found in heart attacks or in heart disease affected hearts. And the idea is by having poor oral hygiene, especially lack of flossing, that causes the bad bacteria in our mouth to sort of enter the bloodstream and get to our heart or cardiovascular system and cause problems there. So by reducing the harmful bacteria in our mouths, especially via flossing, produces a quite considerable mortality benefit, at least cardiovascular mortality, according to this study. So as I say, get flossing. The next study, also much more readily achievable, is to do with the best time of day to exercise. So, well, first things first, any additional exercise you manage to accomplish regardless of the time of day is beneficial. Certainly, it's a case of more exercise is better than less exercise, up to a certain degree, as you will shortly see. However, the question is, if we want to sort of finesse this, the question is, when is the best time of day to exercise if you want to sort of maximize these results? And it appears to be that it's around midday or in the afternoon, the best time of day. Anyway, before we look at those details, just mention that this is a very large study. So quite often, that's an Senolytic study. There were 12 people in total, so tiny sample size. This one involved over 92,000 people from the UK Biobank study who were given accelerometers, however how you pronounce it, to track how many steps they were doing a day and how much, well, it's basically actually not so much steps, but just how much physical activity they were doing each day, and also obviously what time of day that was, and comparing that to their mortality over 7 years. So it was a fairly long study and fairly detailed study. And the times of days were broken into 3 parts, either 5 a.m. to 11 a.m., 11 a.m. to 5 p.m., or from 5 p.m. until midnight. And the results, let's look at this graph here. Okay, so let's take a look at these graphs. So on the left is overall mortality in the A. The B is cardiovascular mortality, and C here is, cancer mortality, and one being no change, and percentage reduction in mortality on the left-hand side, and then the total volume of moderate and physical activity. So they didn't count low physical or activity, only moderate and vigorous physical activity. And what is moderate or vigorous? Looking into this, and so the rough rule of thumb is if you can still sing while doing something, that would be considered light activity. If you can talk but no longer sing, so brisk walking, for example, that would be considered moderate activity. And if you can't even hold a conversation and only say a few words, that would be vigorous. So running, jogging, something like that. Anyway, taking a look at that. So yeah, at the bottom is how many minutes per week people did, and you can see for overall mortality there is a steep decline up until roughly 150 minutes a week. So that's 2.5 hours moderate to physical activity, and then it sort of plateaus out. And maybe unsurprisingly, there is even a greater reduction in cardiovascular mortality than overall mortality. However, there's a less of an effect on cancer, but all similar. Again, a profound effect up to around 150 minutes per week, and then it sort of plateaus and stuff. So that's something, the rough figure to aim for if you can, which are part of, I believe, guidelines, physical activity guidelines in most countries. However, breaking it down into so breaking it down into the different time periods, however, let's look at the D, E, and F first. So that is, once again, D is overall mortality, E is cardiovascular mortality, and F is cancer mortality. And you see sort of 3 lines here. And looking at the glossary, the full line is morning, the dashed line is midday, afternoon, and the dotted line is evening. And you can see here that, well, basically for overall mortality, the dashed line is lower than both the dotted and solid line. But again, even though it's lower, the other 2 are still, you can see a huge drop compared to someone who's not exercising. Again, similar to the previous charts, greater result for cardiovascular disease cardiovascular mortality reduction, less of a result for cancer mortality reduction. And if we take a look at, because again, people don't just necessarily exercise only in the afternoon, only in the morning, only in the evening. If they're looking at the fractions, so now at the bottom, instead of minutes, it's talking about percentage, the fractions. Again, instead of looking at the mortality is almost lowest if people are doing roughly 50% of their exercise in the afternoons, and then roughly around 25% of their exercise in the mornings and evenings. So again, if you really want to maximize, try to achieve at least 50% of your weekly exercise between 11 a.m. and 5 p.m. In my case, I try to go for a walk after I've had my brunch. I try to walk briskly if at all possible. So I don't go for that long. So at least I get some afternoon. But otherwise, I'm more likely to exercise after 5 p.m. So how achievable this is, especially if you're working during the day. But again, you could go for a brisk walk, during your lunch break after you've eaten or before you've eaten. So there are ways of trying to fit in more activity in the middle of the day, if at all possible. But again, knowledge is power. But again, the most important takeaway, which you probably knew already, is just any activity at any time of day up to, so looks like it really plateaus right around 300 minutes a day. So 5 hours a week. You get up to try to get 2.5 hours. And if you can get at least that much moderate, vigorous activity a week done, then, pat yourself on the back. Okay. And now finally, from the roundup, is a study which wasn't sort of a randomized placebo, well, sort of placebo-controlled, not randomized, but they looked in a clinic for men with lower urinary tract symptoms, which are very common as men age, and involves issues with the prostate, and could be an early sign that you getting prostate cancer eventually, like that. Basically the prostate enlarges, and that causes problems with urination and various other things. And I've recently had to start taking, my doctor's recommended, and I've gone along with it, to start having to do PSA tests, which prostate, basically is one measure of the health of the size of your prostate. And there are drugs available for people to take to have issues with that, but those drugs, called A1 or alpha-1 adrenoceptor antagonists, can cause side effects, supposedly. And in this study, they looked at adding a formulation of curcumin called cavaquermin, which supposedly is a preparation which improves its bioavailability. Because one thing about curcumin, which is, by the way, a very popular sort of Indian spice, the orange color, the yellowy orange color you would find in curries. That's that's from the plant turmeric, and curcumin is the main active ingredient in turmeric, but it has very poor bioavailability issues. Slightly improved by adding taking black pepper at the same time, but still quite poor. So there are various proprietary formulations out there which supposedly increase its absorption and bioavailability. And this one is called cavaquermin. Yes, well, they claim somewhere else in this paper that it improves it by 30 or 40 times or something. But anyway, I'm not, as I say, there are numerous curcumin supplements out there which use different methods to increase their bioavailability. Anyway, in this study, Again, it's a fairly small study, 20 men, both in the trial arm and 20 men in the placebo arm, took either their standard of care, these alpha-1 adrenoceptor antagonists, on their own, or with the addition of this curcumin, basically. And what they found out, let's take a look at this chart here. They found out that so see here, 0 is the baseline. Group 1 is placebo. Group 2 is the treatment arm. And this first chart here is looking at the prostate volume, the size of the prostate. So that continued increasing in the placebo arm, but got smaller. At least the average got smaller in the treatment arm. Not for everybody, but the average at least was smaller. Similar results for PSA. Again, here's the 0 line. Got worse for the placebo group, and for most of the treatment arm, it got better. And here, what's this? This is a Qmax difference. So this is basically the urination flow. So 0 is here, and here the higher number is better. So it got worse for the people in the placebo group, and it improved for most people in the treatment arm. And here's the IPSS score, and IPSS is just sort of general, I think it's sort of a questionnaire about the quality of life with the urinary tract symptoms. The lower number is better, and here as well, placebo, it continued to worsen, and it got better for most of the people on the treatment arm. So yeah, and as the authors mention in the other places in the paper, there certainly in animal models, curcumin seems to help with this, and there were some other indications in some other trials not specifically looking at this indication that yes, curcumin can potentially help. Yeah, that's why I included it in the roundup. So that's the end of looking at the roundup. I mean, to be honest, I was a little bit disappointed in February. It wasn't the blockbuster month in new studies, but yeah, sometimes longevity studies are like buses. They come and they bunch up in certain months, and well, anyway, apart from that senolytic study, nothing hugely important this month. However, let's take a look at a few more other studies which came out here in the supplemental section. I won't go too deeply into any of these, but just sort of point out a few things. I mean, in diet. So yeah, some more. To just mention. Yes, slightly interesting. Here you can see the calorie study. So that was the same study we looked at earlier for calorie restriction, but taking another point of view at what did people who are on it think about their body perception, how happy they were with their bodies, and basically people on the calorie study were on the treatment arm were happier about their bodies than the people who were not. So it's yet another reason to maybe consider giving it a go. In the diet section, we're saying here another UK Biobank study showing that ultra-processed food potentially increases cancer risk and mortality. So you have more reasons to eat whole foods. And if you like nuts and blueberries, a couple studies here. I mean, I love nuts and blueberries, showing that they have benefit for cognition in terms of nuts and cardiovascular, or your cardiovascular system for blueberries. And similar to actually going back to our best time of day to exercise study. So here, another exercise one. This was done in mice, however, showing that mice who exercised in late sort of morning time, so I guess around that 11 a.m. equivalent in a mouse, burned more fat when they exercised than if they exercise sort of late at night just before bedtime. So maybe that ties in with the reduction in mortality from that other study. But a couple other studies in the exercise section, I just wanted to point out, looking at how, looking at whether or not exercise can be senolytic, so whether or not exercise can remove senescent cells as one of the benefits of exercise. And lo and behold, these two different studies found that to some degree. The first one was looking at high intensity interval exercise. That's where you sort of run at full pace or cycle at full effort for a minute, then jog slowly or cycle more slowly for a few minutes to recover, for exercising really vigorously again for a brief period of time. So that had senolytic effects on the muscles. But however, the sort of other form of exercise, long-term intensive endurance exercise, so slower but sort of steadier, also seem to reduce senescent markers in the colon, so in the digestive tract of older adults. And going on, yeah, just another study has come out for nicotinamide mononucleotide, otherwise known as NMN. Again, we were waiting for a long time for these, and then finally, last year, the floodgates opened, and as I say, hopefully the same will happen with senolytics. But anyway, in this study, very tiny study, also only 36 people in total, placebo and treatment arms for. They basically took 125 milligrams twice a day, so 250 milligrams of NMN a day for 12 weeks. And they were looking at sort of the arterial stiffness. And I mean, this is too small a study, it was too underpowered. But here the branchial wave velocity, so that's one of the arteries that they basically the stiffer your arteries, the faster the pressure waves are, just because of basic physics. And here, I mean, it seemed to indicate that NMN had a lower rate, lower velocity than the placebo group. And although overall, so yeah, these charts, overall, there wasn't sort of a statistical difference between the placebo and the treatment arms. When they sort of looked into more closely, where they subdivided the groups up, those people with above average diastolic blood pressure, so that's the second of the two readings. The systolic, the first of the two readings, didn't sort of make a difference, but for the dystolic, people with higher dystolic blood pressure, slight reduction for the NMN users, and those people with above average BMI, and those with above average blood glucose, again, small, and at least in these two indications, statistically significant differences between the two groups. So an indication that NMN might be useful for arterial or stiffness, and therefore cardiovascular disease risk. But again, tiny study, 36 people, I guess, 18 people in each arm. So don't read too much into it, but NMN is an increasingly popular supplement. So I thought I would highlight that now. Just a couple more to do. Oh yeah, just so actually sticking with NMN and melatonin, because if you've watched previous videos, I'm all about it's going to take combinations of substances to really have an effect on us. And here in two studies, which I sort of won't go into, but the first one, melatonin, nicotinamide, NMN, and ubiquinol, also known as sort of coenzyme Q10. And the second one, NMN and melatonin. In both of these studies, the first one was for ischemia reperfusion injury, which is the injury you get sort of after a heart attack or after the blockage is cleared and basically the cells which have been starved of oxygen suddenly get this massive hit of oxygen and blood and stuff, which causes stress. And also, actually both studies involved, as I say, reperfusion injuries. And in both of these studies, although both melatonin and nicotinamide mononucleotide improved things on their own, they had an additive or sort of synergistic effect when combined. So just nice to sort of see that. And finally, is it finally? Yeah, just mentioning, I want to mention this one. So astaxanthin, which is what comes from algae, and the reason why salmon are pink and shrimp are pink and lobsters are pink, in fact, because they eat a lot of these microorganisms. But anyway, astaxanthin is a very powerful carotenoid and oxidative stress reducer. Excuse me. And in this case, when 12 milligrams per day were given to him and who's suffering from polycystic ovary syndrome, the big thing is it improved the number of it improved. How many weeks did they do this? Hold on. I think it was like over 8 weeks or something like that. But yeah, various things are slightly better in the in the treatment as opposed to placebo arm. And although it didn't reach statistical significance, you can see placebo is the black bar, the astaxanthin is the gray bar. So negative clinical pregnancies lower in the astaxanthin group. Positive pregnancies, so that's good things, higher in the astaxanthin group. And the difference between the top two and the bottom two is just general pregnancies and chemical pregnancies. So I guess they've been given some pregnancy helping drugs. I'm not sure exactly, but in both of these cases, more women experienced pregnancy with astaxanthin than not, though it did not reach statistical significance. However, where's it gone? Yeah, however, they say that the rate of high quality embryos was higher in the intervention group, and that did reach statistical significance. So the quality of the embryos improved significantly by women taking astaxanthin, 12 milligrams for how many weeks was it? 60 days. So 8-9 weeks, 2 months basically in total. And with that, I think I will call it quits. Plenty of more articles to look at, but we would be here all day. So finally, I just want to thank you for watching this talk through. Once again, if you'd like to find out more about the Canadian Longevity Association, or indeed help us out, either volunteering or otherwise, then please take a look at the links below this video. And all that there remains for me to do is to wish you all the best of health and see you next month. Cheers. Goodbye.